You in pain?
Character's name is Pain. Okay, so it's gonna be start just I do uh headache. That's the word. Yes, but so hello, Kirk.
Hi, Adam.
Um, how are you today? Let's start there.
Doing alright. Thank you. Made a good purchase today, and just, in general, chilling out. How about yourself?
Fairly good, other than some minor things that I already mentioned. Um, now
Ah, yes.
let's let's get started in here with some of those questions. So, as you know, the reason to um, uh, I have called you here today is just to discuss what happened exactly a week ago on Sunday of last week at Dusty and Dusk's wedding, which you were invited as an attendee. Um, so why don't we start with kind of everything that led up to it, um, go from there.
Sure. Well, Ellie and myself, we decided we would head down a little bit early. We weren't sure if we'd run into anything on the way or if, you know, we just wanted to be careful. We wanted to be punctual. We arrived, and we could hear the team on the other side of the door, preparing everything for the wedding, declaring who's in charge of what events, who's going to be uh, ushering, all those kinds of things. Uh, as this was going on, we sat under the archway of the western entrance to Wolfheim, and the nobles paid a visit. They wanted to be let inside. They said there was someone there that needed help, needed blood, and tensions are relatively high between the denizens of Frostfall and those of Wolfheim. And as is naturally the case, the gate was not opened. Now, after a little while of deliberation amongst themselves, the nobles decided that it might be a good idea to take myself and Ellie hostage. I suppose that's a harsh word, but essentially that's what it was, unless you'd like me to say that it was an armed escort back to Castle Frostfall.
I mean, going against your will is always gonna be a kidnapping. I don't think there's really a uh, it doesn't really seem like you were given much of a choice about it. Now, from what I've heard from pretty much everyone else, they had said that um, the nobles had come demanding Sammy, um, but you're saying that they said that there was someone inside the castle in need of blood. What exactly do you believe it was?
It was either.
Just a bluff that they were trying to pull to
I honestly couldn't say. I mean, speculation would suggest that it was a bluff, but again, that's not my place to say. All that I can say is that it ended with myself and Ellie being taken to Castle Frostfall.
um yes, from what I've gathered from even the nobles themselves, it seems like uh what they were trying to do us was force Sammy out. So that piece of information does make it seem indeed trying to lie their way inside. The gate was already
Well,
locked when the
it
gate
was, yes.
um so how How exactly did they go about kind of forced armed escorting you back up there? Did they just kind of be like open discussion? We're sitting there being like, maybe we should force these guys back with their guns out, and then like start walking you up there more or less, or were they already
The
threatening you at this
honest,
point?
the honest turn of events is that guns were pointed and hands were requested, or ordered, should I say. We raised our hands. We followed them as they ordered us to do. Uh, they took us into a small area of the forest next to Wolfheim, where they then disarmed us, and we were then able to put our hands down so that we could follow them back to Frostfall.
Did they uh did they promise your weapons back at that point, or was it something that they just kind of later decided to do?
No, they promised our weapons back.
Okay. The alchemist, at very least, made it sound like it was a very cordial series of affairs. That specifically mentioning that you were, quote, very cordial in the whole thing, understanding that it was a necessary procedure. How would you describe, in your own words, the series of events?
Quite honestly, that's not too far from the truth. To elaborate on the events, once we made it back to Frostfall, myself and Eleanor were questioned. Of course, we were reminded of our position in that situation, and suffice to say, I was more willing to talk than Ellie. I'm wondering if she wasn't flustered or maybe reminded of past trauma that kind of made her seize up. And unfortunately, she was in and out of consciousness through no fault of the nobles that during that entire experience.
She did
I
mention a few times that she had was having issues just passing out because of, as you said, no
Yes,
fault of
yeah,
the
she
nobles.
was.
Um,
No fault of theirs at all. Once I suggested to the nobles that I would be happy to speak with them on, should we say, fairer terms, I was led into another room of the castle so as to be separated from Ellie, and Grom and myself had a conversation with the alchemist popping in periodically just to check on things, make sure nothing untoward was happening, and as the alchemist rightly said, for the most part it was fairly cordial despite the originally high octane beginnings of the event.
Now, you said that you and Grom went into another room to discuss things. What exactly kind of were we discussing in the that other room?
Well, not to not to put too fine a point on it, but Grom was asking me questions about the ritual that took place on the roof of my home not too long ago, where we succeeded in opening our own rift.
Yeah, that's and I assume that was also very similarly what you were discussing, what they were questioning you about originally, when they took you and Ellie into the castle.
For the most part, yes. I was also requested to reveal where Cameron, one of the Riftborn elders, where he lives. I didn't feel bad sharing that information, as Cameron has broadcast on the radio many times his exact location for people to come and have a conversation with him.
Um, so go through my notes here.
Take your time.
So you said that they had reminded you of your position. What exactly do you mean by that?
We were reminded that at the time we were hostages, in the way that hostage takers would remind their hostages that they are in
Uh,
such a situation.
i.e., with hostility?
Coarse language, pointed weapons, nothing that we're not used to on the island when it comes to hostility from folks, but yes, hostility, I suppose you could say.
I understand. So, at what point? I assume that you were also stripped of your PDAs and radios during this time.
Actually, no. I did not take my radio or my PDA. They only took my weapon.
Okay. So were you aware of the discussions, both on the open radio channels, or was there any discussions towards you, or um, regarding your release, or how they wanted Bingo and Sammy to come to the castle for your exchange? Were you aware of any of that?
I was made aware of this, yes.
Was it Grom himself that informed you of this, or was it just simply listening to the open frequencies?
No, it was Grom that let me know. I had my radio turned off. It would have felt somewhat rude to turn on a radio in the middle of being held hostage. But Grom did inform me that I was to be exchanged, as well as Ellie, for both Bingo and Sammy.
Do you know what Grom wanted with the two of them?
As to Sammy, he didn't say. As to Bingo, it seems Grom is not necessarily happy with Bingo shunning Grom's attempts to communicate.
That was the reason he
I'm
gave
sure
then.
they have their reasons. Say
Uh,
again?
I said I assume that's the reason he gave then.
Yes, that's the reason he gave me at least, and I decided to accept that.
I understand. Um, so at what point would you say that they had you were aware of Bingo and Sammy's arrival when they let you, the both of you, go towards the end of this whole encounter, correct?
Yes, that was a very unfortunately bloody affair.
Yeah. Why don't you walk me through your whole departure from the nobles in the as much detail as you can?
Certainly. Whilst I can't speak entirely for Ellie, uh, she was already outside on the bridge. I was still inside. Uh, my hands were rebound, which makes sense given the situation. Uh, Grom kindly returned my weapon. Uh, Grom and the alchemist had a very brief private discussion. The gate was opened, and I was told to start moving outside. This was when both Sammy and Bingo had arrived, and they were preparing for the exchange, and also Crimson had made an appearance.
Tell
And I
me
believe
what you can about Crimson arrival.
Crimson, well, not too long ago, I'm sure Crimson would consider us her enemies, but after the events, what happened on the roof of my tower, or mine and Ellie and Ava's tower, uh, she came to realize that maybe some of the things she currently believed weren't entirely true. She came to us, she started asking questions, we started sharing information, and eventually a friendship blossomed, despite all the things that have happened in the past between the things that myself and Ellie have done, and the things that Crimson has done. Friendship made it to such a strong point that as soon as Crimson heard, whoever told her, I don't know, but as soon as she heard that myself and Ellie were hostages in Frostfall, she was there. She was there, ready to, well, to fight for our freedom. And, well, that's exactly what she did. She noticed that there was someone pointing a gun at Ellie's head, and I could hear her demanding that person point the gun somewhere else. That person refused to do so, and at this point I believe Crimson did draw down on that individual. There was an exchange of gunfire, and right before mine and Ellie's eyes, Crimson was killed. She died for us.
I'm sorry. It sounds like you guys had grown quite close over the past few months.
We had. And she will be sorely missed. There will be a small memorial made for her at the library once we've built it. I think it's only fair that someone who died so that we might live should be remembered with the highest honors.
Ellie mentioned that the two of you had worked red into your clothing to commemorate Crimson's sacrifice. Uh,
Yes.
do you?
I just stand up here. There is red leather incorporated into my jacket, as well as the red on my gloves here and my red glasses.
It's a nice showing for the deceased to remember them in some way or another, for sure.
We've also taken to carrying these longswords with us in Crimson's memory as well, as it was her preferred weapon in battle.
Is that silver?
It is not. It is just steel.
Understood. Alright. So, to keep this fairly brief and wrap up here, is there... I have two more questions for you. One is there anything else you have to say on this topic that you would like the people of the island to know?
Yes. I would like for the people of the island to know that regardless of what people thought of her, the person that she was before she became Crimson, none of that matters anymore. She came to her own decisions, and in the end, regardless of what people thought of her, she showed great courage and died a warrior's death. And that's something deserving of honor.
And for the final question, is there anything you would like to say? Actually, back up a little bit. It's been noted by several others that they don't feel as though the nobles have or will face any consequences for what has transpired this past weekend. Why don't you tell me both what, if you have anything to say regarding that topic, and what, if anything you have to say to the nobles?
Honestly, when it comes to the nobles, I would actually like to extend some gratitude towards Grom. Despite the fact that it was a hostile situation, he was ever the consummate host and respected me throughout the situation. He even complimented me on my suit, which I was not expecting.
Especially in such a tense situation, yeah.
Precisely. To the nobles as a whole, if there are going to be any consequences to their actions, I'm sure part of them somewhere inside, they know that they've murdered a member of their family. Whether they felt like they had to do that or not, that's up to them. And there are plenty of people on this island that considered Crimson a friend. And I can only imagine what comeuppance they may get for her death.
Would you
My
say...
personal...
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead and finish your thought.
I was going to say my personal say on the matter. They have killed two of my friends now. One before all this happened, and Crimson now as well. And whilst I need to take time to grieve for both of them, I've not really had the chance to do so yet. I don't know what the future holds. I would like to be able to turn the other cheek, if I'm entirely honest. Unnecessary bloodshed should never be anyone's first response. But I suppose we'll have to wait and see what happens in the future.
Well, thank you for your time, Kirk. The only other thing I would have, really question-wise for you is, since Crimson was a noble, how would you feel if other nobles decided that they wanted to know more, um, and, wished to, take the same path that Crimson was taking? Uh, what would you say to any of those hypothetical individuals?
Personally, I welcome any and all. If they would like to come forward and ask questions and maybe have some theories cleared up or anything else that's going on, I'd be more than happy to speak with them. We're all inhabitants of this island, even those of us that may not have necessarily originated here. We have a greater enemy on the horizon, and we should all be united in our stand against them, instead of splintered like we are. If any of them decided that they would come forward in good faith to ask questions, to learn, not that I would presume to teach, but I would still do my best.
Alright. Well, that's really all the questions I had for you today, Kirk. Thank you so much for your time and for coming here
You're
and
welcome, Adam.
speaking on such a difficult topic.
I appreciate being given the chance to say my piece. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I am going to switch this off.